Okay, any questions about epithelial tissues, the first category of human body tissues? Because now I need the board so that I can discuss now the other tissues. Right? So now let's move on to the next important main basic type of body tissue. And that is the family known as the connective tissues. So Roman numeral 2. So epithelial tissues, you could put Roman numeral 1. Now comes our second group, connective tissues. Connective tissues consist of many different groups. So we'll classify the different groups of connective tissues carefully. But first, the reason why they're called connective tissues is because most connective tissues will play some important purpose in providing support and binding the other tissues together. Support and binding tissues together. In other words, to support and to connect other tissues, like connect your epithelial tissues to other tissues that are much deeper. Support and connect. To support and bind. Now you see why they're called connective tissues. In addition, each connective tissue would have also its own specific, unique roles as well. But in general, all connective tissues will play that main role of providing some type of support, binding other tissues and organs together, and etc. So now you can see why they're called that way. Okay. But let's take a look at quickly some important things about connective tissues, such as features and structure. Okay, one important feature that connective tissues have is that it is the most widely distributed tissue throughout the body. The most widely distributed tissue throughout your body will be the connective tissues. Widely distributed.
Oh,
Okay. Also, another important thing about connective tissues, that in general, most connective tissues will have some good degree of vascularity. Most are vascular. Vascular, meaning it has good blood vessel supply. The majority have. There is though one exception. When we'll get to that tissue, I'll point that out. But in general, most of them have very good vascularity. Blood vessel supply. Okay? Also, all connective tissues have the same common basic origin. Basic common origin known as mesenchyme. What is mesenchyme? Mesenchyme is an embryonic tissue. An embryonic tissue, a tissue found early in development during embryonic life. So when you're still, an embryo is still developing in a mother's body, it has this type of tissue called mesenchyme. That mesenchyme will give origin and rise to all your connective tissues, whether it's adipose tissue, or bone, or cartilage, or even blood. All will come from the same common basic origin. All do.
Origins what I or
Origin?
Yeah.
Two eyes? Some people spell with two eyes, some people, I think in England might be an E instead. It doesn't matter. But origin means to give rise to something, right?
Just connective tissue.
Excuse me?
Just connective tissue.
Yes, mesenchyme is only the origin of all connective tissues.
What does mesenchyme?
So what does a mesenchyme look like? It looks like a very simple, gooey type of tissue. But it will give rise to every single connective tissue, from blood to bone, from cartilage to adipose tissue, to collagenous tissues, etc., etc. Okay? So those are some important characteristics or features of connective tissue. Okay? Also, what are connective tissues made of? Well, just like any other tissue, connective tissues have to be made of some type of cell group. However, there's a variety of cells, a great cell variety. You will have some cells, like the blood cells, that are very different from cartilage cells, that are very different from fatty cells. So you have a greater cell variety. With epithelial tissues, all the cells were just epithelial cells, but of different shapes. But still, all epithelial cells. With connective tissues, you will have a variety of cells, cell variety. And we'll look at the different cells as we look at the different types of connective tissues. Also, with connective tissues, you will have a greater amount of extracellular matrix. Greater amount of extracellular matrix. With epithelial tissues, there was very little extracellular matrix because the cells we saw were tightly packed. But with connective tissues, there's a lot more extracellular matrix. A lot more space in between the cells. Epithelial, the cells were tightly packed together. In connective, the cells are more spread out. Okay? Now, if you remember, what is extracellular matrix? Extracellular matrix consists of ground substance and protein fibers. So I guess we could look at the different types of protein fibers. By the way, extracellular matrix is ground substance and protein fibers. So let's briefly mention the different types of protein fibers, and then we'll look at the categories of, or classification of connective tissues. The protein fibers. There are three main protein fibers that we find in connective tissues. One of the protein fibers that we find are these fibers that are kind of thick and tough and strong. They provide tensile strength. Tensile strength. They're called collagen. Collagen are like cord-like fibers. Cord-like, like a fishing line. Have you ever seen a fishing line? How that cord is really tough. It takes a shark to break that line, pull really strong. A small fish cannot break it easily. And if you try to break it, it's very difficult as well. Like this cord consists of fibers there, fibers that provide a tensile strength. So you have collagen fibers. Then we have another type of fiber that is more like this. Stretches out. Okay? We call those elastic fibers. Elastic fibers. Again, collagen fibers, elastic fibers. Elastic fibers have the property of elasticity that can stretch out and recoil. That's the true meaning of elasticity. Is chewing gum elastic? Is clay elastic? Those of you who said no would be correct. Chewing gum is not elastic. You can stretch it out. You can stretch it out. But does it recoil again?
The skin is elastic, right?
We do have elastic fibers in the dermis of our skin, yes. But elasticity means that it can stretch out and then recoil. Clay doesn't do that. Clay, you stretch it out, it'll stay stretched out. Chewing gum, you stretch it out, it'll stay stretched out. But it has to be able to stretch out and then recoil again for it to be elastic, like elastic fibers. So elasticity really means that it can recoil after it's stretched out, like a rubber band. Now you know the true meaning of elasticity. Okay. Most people think of elastic something that stretches out, but that's not completely true. If it doesn't recoil, then it's not elastic. Okay. I can stretch this out, but it won't recoil, so most likely it's not elastic. This I can stretch out, but let it go. It doesn't really recoil. It's just folded there. That's all it is. But now I'm using this for my third type of protein fiber, and those are the reticular fibers. Reticular fibers are branchy. They branch out and they form net-like structures. So here, I see different examples of things that look like a net. Each of these little fibers there stretches or branches out, and it forms net-like structures. Net rhymes with the word ret. In fact, the word ret in Latin means net-like, net. So reticular fibers have that property of being these short fibers that branch out to form net-like structures, like the net that I have here. So there, as you can see, different varieties of fibers. Some connective tissues will have all three varieties. Others will have more of one than of the others. So we'll look at this now as we discuss the different classifications of connective tissues. Up to there, everybody follow me? Any questions?
Can you describe the collagen fiber again? Sorry.
Collagen fibers?
Yeah.
These are generally long and thick, but have a lot of tensile strength, like the electrical cords on your microscopes, like this string or a rope, just to get an idea what it would look like. Okay. But now, elastic fibers would be more thinner and have that property of elasticity. And reticular fibers are not very long, but they're very branchy-like. That when they come together, they form that net-like structures there. That purpose would be to trap things, right? What is a net-like structure for? A net-like structure is for trapping things.
And where do you
Like
find
fish.
that on the body?
We'll see in a moment as we do the classification. Okay, up to there, any other questions? So let's classify now our connective tissues. We classify connective tissues into 4 important groups. Now we'll use Arabic numerals. Arabic numeral number 1 for my first group of connective tissues. The first group of connective tissues are referred to as the connective tissue proper group. The connective, I'm going to abbreviate connective, tissue, I'm going to abbreviate that, and proper. The connective tissue proper group or connective tissue proper family is a group of connective tissues. A large group of connective tissues that includes many varieties. One important thing about the connective tissue proper group is that they will all have an important type of cell called fibroblasts. Contain fibroblasts. What are the fibroblasts? These are cells that produce the protein fibers that we already mentioned. The fibroblasts are the cells that produce the fibers. That's why they're called fibroblasts. So all connective tissue proper types will consist of other type of cells as well, but they will contain, very importantly, these fibroblasts that will produce the fibers. Okay? So what else could we say about this group of connective tissues? Well, this group will consist of around 6 different types. So let's start with the first type. The first type of connective tissue proper, number 1, the first type. Well, now we're going to use letters. You could use letters now, or just list them. So this first group will have like 6 different types. The first one is called the areolar, also called the loose connective tissue. CT is the abbreviation used often in books for connective tissue. So areolar or loose connective tissue. One important thing about areolar connective tissue is that areolar connective tissue is considered to be the prototype of all the connective tissues. The prototype. Anybody can tell me what the word prototype means?
Copy.
Grouping? No. Anybody else?
First copy.
Copy?
It's not like the final product.
No.
Not the final product.
No.
Maybe the original?
You're getting close now, warmer, yes?
Like a blueprint?
Blueprint, you're getting close as well. Okay, so what prototype means, it means the exemplary, the representative, the model. Okay, the prototype CUNY student is the, and you want to hear the word, LaGuardia student, right? Although Hunter College students, Queens College students would not agree with you. They would say the prototype CUNY student or university student is the Queens College student. But if you want to consider this to be, you're the prototype student, excellent. If not, pick somebody else. And it doesn't have to be a private school like Columbia University. Okay. Anyway, I hope that would be great if we were considered to be the prototype college student, right? The LaGuardia student, the prototype. What that means, that it means the exemplary, the model, the representative. Why is it the representative of all the connective tissues? Is because areolar tissue has, first of all, has all three types of fibers. All three types of fibers. Collagen, elastic, and reticulin. Also contains variety of cells. And in addition, it has plenty of ground substance. That it makes it a wonderful tissue to look at and study to understand more about connective tissues in general. So now you can see why it is considered the prototype. It has all the basic components of any connective tissue, and including all three types of fibers. Whereas if you look, for instance, at a certain other type of connective tissue, it will really not have collagen, or it may not have elastic fibers, or it may have very few cells and mostly just ground substance. So it does vary from one tissue to another, but areolar has a lot of these three things that it makes it a wonderful type of tissue to study. Okay. Where do we find areolar connective tissue? So that might be the last question here. Where do we find this? A good example of a place we find it is that we find it under your skin. Under your skin. So under all layers of your skin, you find a thin sheet there of areolar tissue. Under all layers of your skin. Okay, so if you took off your skin, if you cut a piece of skin, you took it all off, underneath all the layers of your skin, there are several layers of skin. You take that off, you'll see that there's something that looks like bubble wrap. With a magnifying glass or with a microscope, look like bubble wrap. That would be areolar connective tissue. Okay, so let's move on though to some other types of connective tissue proper. Again, this is the first group, and we have 6 different types here. Number 2, another type of connective tissue is one that is also found under your skin, but generally much deeper under your skin. And that is adipose tissue. Adipose tissue. Now, adipose tissue consists mainly of fatty cells. The fatty cells are called adipocytes. Adipocytes. Cytes means cells. So fatty cells. When we say adipocytes, we mean fatty cells. When you look at this type of tissue, you see the cells. They look like bubbles, filled with oil, filled with a fatty-like substance there that looks like oil, that makes the cells look like little round balls, like olives in a jar, or whatever. Sort of that yellowish color, yellowish green color, because of the fat that they contain. So adipocytes, these are found in adipose tissue. Now, where do we find adipose tissue? You find it deeper under your skin. Under your skin. So you might have your skin first, then you have a little thin sheet of areolar tissue, and then under that you'll have fat. You also do find a lot of fat tissue around your organs of your body, such as, for instance, here on the model of the heart, you see here covering part of the surface of the heart, you see some fatty yellow tissue there. By the way, this looks like a healthy heart. But people may have hearts where they have a lot more fat around the heart, which is not good. Okay? But yes, you find fatty tissue or adipose tissue under your skin, meaning that it builds up around areas under your skin. In men, a lot more around the belly and thighs. In women, more around the upper torso and hips. That's give women and men their different shapes. Okay? And if you have a lot more in general throughout most of your body, then you can also notice that. And that's the big thing today with people trying to burn down the fat. Anyway, you can see also around the surface of your organs, like the heart, your stomach, your other organs throughout your body. Some more than others, like in the heart. Okay, so that's adipose tissue. Now let's move on though to the dense type of connective tissues, the dense ones. We have two types of dense collagenous tissues. Let me put this away because it might block your view from the whiteboard. But we have, first of all, one type of dense collagen, rich in collagen tissue. It's called dense, regular, collagenous tissue. Dense, regular, collagenous tissue versus the second one, which is dense, irregular. Dense, irregular, collagenous, or just simply tissue. So what is the difference? Both of them have a lot of collagen fibers. So let me get something to now I don't have fibers here or strings. I wish I did have strings. But I'll use these sticks to represent collagen fibers. Let's pretend each of these sticks is a collagen fiber. Okay, so you can see that I have several samples of sticks representing collagen fibers. When the collagen fibers are arranged into parallel bundles like this, into parallel bundles, it gives it a nice, neat, regular structure. Regular, right? Dense, regular, collagenous. When the collagen fibers are arranged into nice parallel bundles. Okay, so this is an example of what it kind of would look like. And where would you find this type of tissue? One great example of a place where you find it is you find it in the tendons of your body. Tendons. What are tendons? Tendons are these structures that look like cords that attach your skeletal muscles to a bone. If you want to look at real tendons, you have a real big tendon in the back of your ankle. In the back of your ankle, you can feel that as well. There's a very tough cord-like structure there. That's called the Achilles tendon or calcaneal tendon. You have tendons in your elbow, for instance, right there. So you can see the tendons right there. And you have them throughout. You have them even on the back of your hand, the tendons there. Through many other places of your body, you have tendons. What those tendons do is they connect skeletal muscles to some bone. But now, therefore, a great example of regular, dense, regular, collagenous connective tissue would be in your tendons. But what about irregular? Dense, irregular, collagenous, or dense, irregular tissue would be when we take the collagen fibers and now randomly do this. In the first type, they were bundled in parallel fashion. But in the second type, the collagen fibers are randomly arranged. Here's a good example of something that you might have seen do that. When you put spaghetti from a box or from a bag, you take out the spaghetti, you put it into a hot pot of water. At first, it's all bundled in parallel mode. Parallel bundles of spaghetti, right? The pasta. But what happens as it warms up, it heats up? The spaghetti starts to randomly mix up in the pot, right? Like if you're making soup, even better. But you see the spaghetti sticks start to soften up and they all randomly arranged, like what I see right there on the table. So one example of place where we find this type of connective tissue that has a lot of collagen fibers arranged randomly, not parallel, but randomly, would be, for instance, in the dermis of your skin. Dermis of skin. Now, some of you wonder, Professor, I thought the skin was epithelial tissue. only the epidermis, the surface. But under your skin, the deeper part of the skin, if I took this off, you would see the deeper part is actually this type of connective tissue, which is called dermis, made of dense, irregular, collagenous, or just simply dense, irregular tissue. Okay? The collagen fibers are not arranged in a nice pattern, but rather randomly mixed up there in a random fashion. Now, two more tissues here. We have here the connective tissue proper. We have next the dense elastic connective tissue, or simply the elastic connective tissue. But I'll put dense because that's the way I think it has it in your book. I'll put dense though in parentheses. Elastic connective tissue. Dense elastic connective tissue. So now, I don't have too many of these, but I guess I can use these two for an example. Okay, anyway, I'll just use these few here for examples, but you can see there, in dense elastic connective tissues, right? Dense elastic connective tissues, you'll have a lot of elastic fibers like this, lots of elastic fibers arranged into parallel fashion as well. Bundles of parallel elastic fibers. Bundles of elastic fibers. Okay? I could take a lot more rubber bands, but put them together in a parallel fashion. Put them, not random like this, like on the table, you see, but rather more like this. Okay? Okay. Where do we find a tissue that has this type? We find this, for instance, in the walls of your blood vessels. So in the walls of your veins and arteries especially in your arteries, you'll have a lot of this type of connective tissue. Lots of parallel bundles of elastic fibers, giving your arteries elasticity. That's why your arteries and veins are elastic. As blood goes through it, the wall stretches out, and as the blood passes already, then the walls recoil again. The walls of your arteries expand like this, and then recoil. Expand and recoil, expand and recoil, because it has a lot of elastic fibers in it, right? Thick bundles of elastic fibers. That's what it's called, dense. Okay, and then we have one last type here of connective tissue, which is just simply called reticular tissue. Reticular connective tissue. Or simply reticular tissue. Now, anybody can guess what important thing we find in reticular tissue? Anybody can see there from the blackboard? What do you think is found rich in reticular tissue? Reticular fibers. Lots of these reticular fibers. So here you can see a lot of reticular fibers. Each little red fiber here represents reticular fiber. Reticular fibers. So it'll be rich with a lot of reticular fibers that it forms a net-like structure. Net-like structures in places where its purpose is to trap things. Two good examples of organs or places where we find a lot of reticular tissue is the spleen. Example, spleen. And your lymph nodes. So when you take a lymph node or you take the spleen and you actually dissect it and put a piece under the microscope, you will see that it has a lot of this type of tissue. A lot of reticular tissue, rich in reticular fibers. The purpose of the spleen is to trap old blood cells. The purpose of your lymph nodes is to also filter your lymph fluid. So by filtering, by trapping things, it serves that nice purpose of acting like a net. Reticular tissue. Acts like a net. Like this net that I have on the table. Okay, that first group there is all the different types of connective tissue proper, a large group. The other groups get smaller though. The other groups, there's not many, and it's just a few things important. But let's look at our second group of connective tissues. Any questions about this first group? So the second group of connective tissues, number 2, Arabic numeral 2, will be the cartilages. Cartilages. And the next 2 connective tissues will briefly mention just a few main things. We'll see them more specifically when we discuss bone in another couple weeks and blood, okay, in a few more months. Okay? So cartilages. Let's start with this connective tissue though. Cartilage is tough and flexible.
Nose.
That's one example. But we have many more. But yes, that's a good example. Tough and flexible. So cartilage connective tissue, or just simply cartilage tissue, cartilages are tough but flexible. Tough but flexible. Also, cartilages is the example of a connective tissue that is actually avascular. This is the only type of connective tissue. Most are vascular, but this is the only type that is the only one to be avascular. Now, if you're wondering, Professor, how come when I pierced my ear or pierced my nose, how come there was bleeding though?
Because of what's surrounding it.
Because what's surrounding it is skin. Skin, which has dermis, right? Dermis and epidermis. And the dermis is rich in blood vessels, right? Most connective tissues are vascular, right? The dermis we saw is going to be vascular. So what bleeds, not much, but will bleed a little, will be, for instance, piercing the nose or ear, where you find a lot of cartilage. But if you pierce a place where there's no cartilage, like your belly button, nipples, other parts of your skin like cheeks and whatever, eyebrows, that's going to bleed and hurt a lot more because there is no cartilage there. It's mostly just skin there. So consider that if you're going to get piercings. Cartilage is better to pierce because there's no blood vessel. Okay? It's avascular. Okay? Now, what else can we say about cartilages? One other important thing about cartilages is that cartilages consist of an important cell group called chondrocytes. Chondrocytes are the cells of cartilage. The word chondro means cartilage. Whenever you see the word chondro, such as diseases that have, let's say the word chondro, or chondrocytes, or chondroitin, you can find that even in Costco. It's some type of supplement that people take to make their skeletal system stronger. Chondroitin. Anytime you see the word chondro, it's referring to something to do with cartilage. So chondrocytes are the cells of cartilage. And what these cells do is that these cells, here's a chondrocyte, here's another chondrocyte, and another. The chondrocytes are found in tiny, small spaces. The small spaces of chondrocytes are called lacuna. These are lacuna, while the chondrocyte is the cell inside the lacuna. So the cells are held within these small, tiny spaces called lacuna. In fact, lacuna is not only found in cartilage, but lacuna is also found in bone tissue. Bone also will have lacuna with cells in them. But the cell that's in the lacuna, in these small, lacuna again is the space. The cells that are found there in cartilage are called chondrocytes. So that's why when you look at cartilage tissue, you'll see something like a ring around the cell. That's the space there, called the lacuna. Okay, now let's look at the 3 types of cartilages. There are 3 types of cartilages, and we'll just list them here. First of all, we have hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is actually firm. It's actually firm and has a smooth, glassy appearance. Smooth, glassy appearance. Okay? If you want to have an idea what hyaline cartilage is like, again, hyaline cartilage, or whatever you read cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is very similar to the consistency of plastic toys, the cheap plastic toys. the consistency is somewhat of the plastic bottle here. Pretty firm, tough, and sort of that glassy appearance, right? Glassy, smooth appearance. Like the plastic here on this bottom here. Smooth and glassy-like appearance. Okay, so where do we find this type of cartilage? One great place we find this cartilage is we find it, for instance, around the ends of a bone. Around the ends. Now, when you have a bone, here's a bone. At the ends of a bone, you'll have here often some type of cartilage there that protects it for joint movement. Whether it's your fingers or your legs or whatever. That cartilage right there is hyaline cartilage. Hyaline found in the articular cartilages. Articular means joint. In your articular cartilages, such as at the ends of your long bones, of your arms and legs and fingers even, you found there this articular cartilage made of hyaline cartilage. Articular again means joint. Same thing at the other end, down here. You have bone, but at the end, you have some hyaline cartilage. When you eat chicken or foods that are bony, like chicken, turkey, duck, lamb, whatever, bony like foods, when you finish all the meat at the end of the bone, there's this white, shiny stuff, looks white, which I don't eat it, but I take it off and give it to my dog. She loves it. She chews on it for a while. That's hyaline cartilage. Okay, I heard some people even eat that too. But it's kind of rubbery, a little bit tough. Is it good to eat that? I don't know. Some people say it is, but personally I don't like it, so I throw it out or give it to my dog. Okay, now, another place where we find hyaline cartilage, so at the articular cartilages, at the joints, articulations mean joint, right? But also you find it around the trachea. Your trachea is your windpipe. And around the trachea, we have rings of hyaline cartilage. This is the trachea. Around the trachea, you have these sort of rings of hyaline cartilage. Okay? And one other good place, one of you indicated? Your name?
Nose.
I'm sorry, your name?
Pia.
Excuse me?
Pia.
Pia said, in your nose. Now, of course, there is skin on your nose too. But underneath the skin, there's a lot of rich supply. Without the cartilage, you wouldn't have a nose. You'd have just a hole there in the middle of your face. Okay? But all that cartilage gives your nose its framework. Nose. And it's pretty tough, right? You can get it punched, you can get it, it's pretty strong and tough there, protecting the hole in the middle of your face. Okay, so those are some places there, examples of places with hyaline cartilage. I think we can even show you one more place, the costal cartilages. Anybody knows what's the costal cartilages? Your ribs, right. Attaching your ribs to the mid-piece bone. Let me see if I can get it.
There's one up there.
This just for a moment, because I'm going to use this also for the other type of cartilage as well. But here, you see your ribs. Ribs are bone. And this middle bone that we have here in the middle of our chest is called the sternum. That's also bone tissue. But attaching this bone to that bone, you see these rubbery-like cartilages here. These very firm, see, pretty firm. Now this is not real, but that would be very close to the actual tissue of hyaline. These costal cartilages are also made of hyaline type of cartilage tissue. Okay, number 2, or the next one. We're going to list them here because we're already using number 2 for cartilages. You can use letters if you prefer, A, B, and C. Okay? But anyway, I'll just list them here. And the next type of cartilage is elastic cartilage. Now, elastic cartilage will consist of a lot more elastic fibers. In fact, will be rich in elastic fibers. So this type of cartilage has a lot of elastic fibers. But do not confuse elastic cartilage with elastic connective tissue. Elastic connective tissue we find only, for instance, in the walls of your blood vessels. While elastic cartilage is the type of cartilage that has, again, chondrocytes and lacuna, but also will be rich in elastic fibers. Now, one place that we find a lot of elastic cartilage is, for instance, in the epiglottis. The epiglottis is a little flap in your throat that shuts when you're swallowing food, so that food doesn't go down into your lungs. So that's one example, epiglottis. However, I have a much better example for elastic cartilage that you can actually test and pull and let go to see that it actually does recoil like a rubber band because of the richness in elastic fibers. What place that you think I'm referring to that has a rich supply of elastic fibers and also contains elastic cartilage?
The ear.
The ear, very good. That it is relatively safe to pull on a child's ear when they're misbehaving. That you don't really have to worry about permanent disfiguration because it'll always recoil back to its shape again. Now don't pull too hard either because you might rip skin. You don't want to damage. But it's a good way to punish a child. Pull them. You know? That you don't really have to worry much about permanent damage or. Now, if you come from a whole different trend today where people are against punishing children, then that's your decision. But I'm more old school, and I think a good spanking once in a while does help a child. And I'm talking about, I have my own sister-in-law, never touch the children. Oh, let them do what they want. They're misbehaving, running around restaurants while people are trying to eat and yelling and screaming. I can't do much because I'm not their parents. But if I was the parent, just pull their ear. Give them a good one, you know. But again, we're not going to debate that because, again, psychologists today, I think those psychologists need a spanking too. I bet many of you have gotten and were corrected that way. It works much better than just leaving them alone. Okay, so elastic cartilage. Now, lastly, we have fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage. Okay, fibrocartilage. This one will consist of lots of very strong, rough collagen fibers. Rough collagen fibers. Hyaline cartilage has more fine fibers, fine collagen fibers. Okay? But in fibrocartilage, it consists of much more rougher, thicker collagen fibers. Okay? So here, if I drew collagen fibers, it would be a lot more thicker like this. Okay? That gives this gives this type of cartilage very strong firmness, tough, very tough and strong. Okay, very fibrous and strong. Fibrous and strong. So where do we find a good example of this type of cartilage? We find it, for instance, example, one place that we find this cartilage is right here, in the intervertebral discs. The discs of your spine. If you look at them, or you even were able to remove this cartilage, you will see that the discs of your spine are tough and rough, feel like rough, like a rough sponge. Okay? And that's because of this type of cartilage that it's made of. Intervertebral discs. Another student once asked me, could that be found in the knee as well? Yes, the meniscus. In your knee, you have something, a pad, it's called meniscus. The meniscus of your knee is also tough and flexible. Now, why are these cartilages in your spine and the cartilages. Well, it's not here, but if you had one, you had meniscus here, it will be also made of fibrocartilage. Why are they going to be, those places will have fibrocartilage?
To save, not
To what?
to save the bones.
To protect not only your bones, but your whole spine and your body, because of all that weight and pressure on your spine. And if you do exercise like jumping, that's a lot more, and on your knees as well. So there are certain places in your body where you're going to have a lot more of this rougher, tougher type of cartilage, like in the discs of your spine and in your knees as well, where it needs a lot more protection. So those are two good places where we find fibrocartilage. The discs of your spine and in the meniscus, the discs that you have in the middle of your knee, the middle of your knee joint. Okay, questions about cartilages. Now, number 3, the next type of connective tissue. Now the list gets smaller and very quick. The next one will be discussed more closely next week after we're done with the first lab test. And after we're done with the first lab test, then right after that we will continue and explore bone and the skeletal system. So bone tissue. I'll just briefly mention 2 or a couple of major things about bone. One important thing about bone is that it is the hardest of all the connective tissues. The hardest. Why is it hard that you could do this, that you could do this? Why is it hard? Because bone tissue consists of a lot of calcium, phosphates. What are those things? Minerals. Good. So it contains a lot of minerals that make it tough and strong. It's a type of hardened type of connective tissue. A hardened extracellular matrix. Hardened by the minerals that it contains. Of course, they have to be cells as well. And the cells of bone are different types of bone cells. One major type of bone cell are the osteocytes. The bone cells that deposit minerals into your bone tissue. So bone tissue, we'll see that more closely next week, but just a couple of things here to add to our list here of tissues of the body. It is a connective tissue with these specific few things. And number 4, one last type of connective tissue. Anybody can guess what it is? I mentioned it earlier. No? Blood. Very good. Blood is connective tissue? Yes. Remember, all connective tissues come from mesenchyme, including blood. Blood did come from mesenchyme. Also, how can blood be connective? It does kind of connect your different organs and organ systems, right, by communicating through blood flow. So yes, you can consider it to be connective tissue. It is because it has the same origin, but also it has some purpose there in communicating, connecting your body together. Not like the other tissues do, but in a different way. Now, with blood, we'll see that more closely in another month or so. So we're still way far from that, but just a couple of things I want to mention about blood. Blood consists of an extracellular matrix known as blood plasma. Blood plasma. This is the extracellular matrix of blood. And then, blood consists of cells called formed elements. The formed elements are the different varieties of cell and cell-like structures. Now, not all formed elements are cells. Platelets are not really cells. But red blood cells, white blood cells are cells. So for that reason, we will not say blood cells. We'll rather just say formed elements. We'll learn more about that. You don't have to write all those different types of formed elements down, but we'll learn about them when we get to blood in another month. Okay, just those few things to introduce. One last thing about blood is that blood lacks protein fibers. So blood is the only example of a connective tissue that has no fibers, no protein fibers. If it had protein fibers, if it had fibers, your blood would get stuck and it wouldn't flow. It would obstruct blood flow somewhere. So it can have protein fibers. It does have a lot of fluid called plasma, but no fibers. That would just make your blood stop flowing. So dangerous. There are no fibers in blood. Okay, that is your different groups of connective tissue, the connective tissue proper, cartilages, bone, and blood. Now, the other two tissues briefly mentioned as well. Roman numeral 3, muscle tissue. Muscle tissue, we'll learn about when we study muscles in another month or so as well. But it consists of a group of cells that look like fibers. The cells are called, often they're called myofibers because they look like fibers. Myofibers are the cells of muscle tissue. So why don't we call them myocells? We call them myofibers because they actually look like fibers, but in reality they are cells. Different from most of the cells, that most cells are round or square shaped, but myofibers are actually long like fibers. Do I have an example of myofibers? Yes, just to show you quickly, because we'll do this when we get to the chapter of muscle. But here is an example of muscle tissue with muscle fibers, with myofibers. Myo means muscle. And as you can see, the cells look long and thin, like fibers. Okay? There are, by the way, 3 types of muscles which we'll discover when we get to study of muscle. And Roman numeral 4, the last type of tissue is what? Which is the last type of body tissue? Nervous tissue. Good. Nervous tissue. Just 2 things about nervous tissue. Nervous tissue will be explored in more detail in 204, but just one thing about nervous tissue, or 2 things, is that it consists of an important group of cells called neurons. Neurons are the main cells of nervous tissue. Neurons are the cells that produce and generate impulses, nerve impulses. And the cells that support the neurons are called neuroglia. Neuroglial cells, or neuroglia, okay? Neurons, again, are the main cells that produce these signals we call nerve impulses. Electrical signals that travel quickly throughout your body, spread from your brain or through your nerves quickly. From my brain spreads to my hand to grab this. And the neuroglia, the cells that protect them and surround them and support them. That's as much as we'll mention about nervous tissue. Places where we find nervous tissue, the brain, your spinal cord, and the nerves throughout your body. Okay, that would now complete all your different tissues of the human body. Any questions? So in the last 10 minutes here, guys, you could look at a few of the slides that you have there on the trays, and then when you're done, put the microscopes away. Okay, so spend the next few minutes looking at these few slides. Pick whichever you like on the tray there. On each side of the table, there's a tray. You do have to share those trays. But if you want to look at blood, go ahead. If you want to look at nervous tissue, that's fine, or muscular tissue, whatever you like. An organ, you can look at an organ as well. In an organ, you'll see various types of tissues.